yeah, you might fry out a batch or two, you're gonna make mistakes, but in making mistakes, that is where your food or your pho gets better. And as your PT, as your pho coach, I'm telling you to push the limits, add more salt in each time until you hit that sweet spot. Hey guys, my name's Leighton. This one's called How to Fix a Pho Broth When It's Too Salty. You may have put too much salt or too much fish sauce in search of depth and you went overboard. But in this video, I'm going to teach you how to correct this mistake. Most weeks I get it right, but every now and then I make a mistake. Now this week I made my batch. Served it all week, very busy week, but it was only until yesterday that I found out I went a bit overboard with the salt. Right guys, so to quickly explain what the hell is going on here, I've made a batch of bun reel and it's come slightly salty. And Mum's already divided this into containers, and what I'm trying to do now is to fix a fuck up. And how I'm doing this is there's two ways about it. You can add water in to just even out that saltiness, or you can add in gort or bone concentrate. This one is a pork based one, and it is only slightly salty, which means I'm just going to come through with a ladle's worth of this pork broth, add it into each one, and it's perfect. And that is how you fix up a situation where you season your soup slightly salty. You can almost say this bone broth is like a spare tire to get you out of a sticky situation, because as you know, if you're on the road on a highway and you have a flat tire, that spare wheel is going to get you out of trouble. And the exact same thing can apply here. I always have some spare bone broth because you never know what's going to happen. And even though I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times, even then there are times when I don't get it 100%, which is why I'd rather come in salty rather than not salty, because you can have a situation where you've done the final adjustment and when you taste it, there's still no taste. And what's happened there is you've just cut down that broth too much with water and you're left with something that's just got no taste and it's hollow. But the one thing you don't want to be doing is adding in sugar to try and correct something that is salty. Because what happens is it actually accentuates or amplifies that saltiness even further. And that is a strange thing that I've discovered over the years, just mucking around with all my soups trying to get it right, is when it's too mutton and you add in sugar thinking it's going to even out that saltiness, it makes it even worse. So don't ever do that. Always add in water, or best practice, have some spare broth in the fridge or freezer to get you out of a sticky situation like this. I went too deep, and I've said it a few times on this channel that every batch that I do, I'm always trying to push the limit. And this week I did some tweaks to my recipe, and at the time it tasted all right, but I just went slightly overboard in search of depth. I knew something was wrong when my staff brought back bowls into the wash-up area, and a lot of people didn't finish their broth, which is highly unusual. During the week I served it, but no one complained until last night. Last night I had a regular Long, who came in, and after he finished his bowl, he said to me, slightly salty. And that's when I started panicking. I went into the kitchen, made myself a tiny bowl, and had a taste of the broth. And yeah, he was right. There's this slightly salty edge to it. Depth is a term I like to refer to when I'm chasing this taste of my broth, where it is đậm đà, as they say in Vietnamese. I like to touch the ocean floor in terms of how deep and rich that broth is. Now, you get there by adding salt and fish sauce, but sometimes when you add too much, you kind of go past the point of no return, where it registers as being salty or mutton, and that's what happened to me this week. Most people, their first initial response is to take out the sugar and add it in. This is the biggest mistake people make, adding in sugar. Because what actually happens is it amplifies that mistake even further. People think when you add in sugar, it's gonna take that curve back up and correct it, when in fact it does the opposite. So the first thing you need to do is dial back. So say you've got a pot of pho that you've made, it's slightly salty. The easiest way to fix it is to add in water. This tones down that saltiness. But if you add too much, this is where you run into the problem of making the soup too loãng, as they say in Vietnamese, or too watery. So you gotta be careful of this. The best practice is to have some spare bone broth. Add this back in and you'll find it does a much better job. So over here I've got my batch of pho. I've corrected it by adding in half a litre of bone broth. Now, a couple of people have asked, when I'm making a bone broth, do I add in salt? And the answer is no, because you never know when you need to correct. And if the broth has already got salt in it, adding it into this to correct it is going to make the problem even worse. So best practice, have some spare bone broth. But over here, I've also got some broth from beef ribs, which I've simmered. Or you can use oxtail broth. Alright guys, taking it from the very top, and just to summarize this entire video, salt is what brings out flavor in your food at its most basic level. You need to add this in to your pho if you want it to taste correct. If you add too little, like what most recipes tell you to do, it's gonna taste bland. It's not quite right. It's like there's something missing. Very easy way to think of it is if you're down at Macca's, you order a Big Mac meal in the drive-thru, and as you're driving out, you're at the set of lights, you put your hand into the bag, taste the fries, but guess what? They forgot the salt, and it tastes like garbage. If you add too much salt, you go into this region where it's too salty. You could almost say it tastes like seawater. But if you get it right, this is where you hit depth, you hit this spot I like to call the taste floor. And this is where you get the maximum taste and potential out of your broth. But in order to get to this point, you need to take risks. You need to be adventurous in your seasoning. You need to take it to the danger zone. Sorry, I'm a big Tom Cruise fan. Top Gun's just come out and I just had to drop that line into this video. The second thing I wanted to say is if you add in too much salt, unfortunately, there is no undo button. It's not an Excel sheet. You can't just click Ctrl Z and undo it. But with this simple technique, this is how you backtrack. But mind you, this technique only works if your baseline recipe is really good. Don't expect it to take you places if your recipe is garbage, because all it does is take you back to what I like to refer to as no man's land, or for purgatory, where it just doesn't taste right. The last thing I wanted to say is don't be afraid to make mistakes. We all do. And you're gonna make plenty along the way. And if it makes you feel better, this week I copped a bad review on Google. Tina gave me a 2-star. She said the broth here is too salty, but I already knew that. Luckily, it was only a minor fix. It was only 500 mils to 12 liters of filled broth. So you can see you don't need much. But the main thing is I wrote down where I went wrong so that I don't make the same mistake twice. And you should too next time you're feeling adventurous. And that is it for tonight's video. I hope you enjoyed it. My name's Leighton, helping you bring back your broth from the brink, saving it from the drain. Make sure to subscribe, like. See you guys in my next video.